So USB, I think, is probably to me, it's a revolution in connection technology on the Windows platform. Well, actually, on all computers, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's definitely used in Mac. It's used in Linux and many others, most likely as well.
Now, USB acronym.
Universal Serial Bus.
Right.
So now it replaced serial ports on the old systems you'd see on Windows 98.
Yeah.
And I mean, you still do on some computers these days. You see a little dongle with 9 pins on it. That was the serial port.
Mm-hmm. And parallel ports.
And parallel ports were for printers and things like that, a little bit wider. And USB, I mean, serial and parallel are two different sorts of technologies. So I guess we should just really quickly go over what serial versus parallel is.
Mm-hmm.
With serial, it was basically throwing data one bit after the other.
Right.
Everything in a row. That's what serial is. Parallel would send a whole pile of information together in parallel.
Right.
So the Universal Serial Bus was designed to replace the old serial and the new parallel. Well, I guess they were roughly the same age. Or yes, no?
I don't know. Circa, I mean, we're going back a long time.
Right,
It's
it's
back
a long
into the
time
80s
ago.
now, but yeah.
Yeah, so there's a whole generation of users out there that probably have had nothing but USB on their systems. So the Universal Serial Bus is oddly a lot faster than the parallel, which throws a whole pile of data at the same time, despite the fact that it's doing it one after the other. So we started with...
You know what? I always think that men are serial and women are parallel.
Quite likely.
Men, we can focus on one thing at a time, and women, parallel, right? Multitasking. And juggling the babies, and they're, cooking, and they're working, and they're doing all this stuff, and all we can do is sit on the couch and look at the TV.
Yeah, if we're cooking, that's all we're doing. We're cooking. I'm stirring the pot. I'm not answering the phone because my brain just
Honey, what are you
can't deal
thinking
with
about? Nothing, just stirring the pot. Anyway.
Yeah, some men can multitask.
Not very few. Anyway, so Universal Serial Bus is a serial technology. It's basically rapid fire. Now there was 2 generations, right? We've actually seen 2 generations so far with USB.
Yeah, there was USB 1.0. That was the very first generation that came out, but that was quickly replaced by USB 1.1.
It's basically a patch, a fix.
Pretty much, yeah. They got a bunch of things fixed up from the first bad generation. And that was 11 megabits per second.
Yeah.
So not terribly fast.
No.
There's still a lot of USB 1.1 ports kicking around on the back of machines.
Yeah. And devices, if you've ever plugged an old device into a newer, it'll say, hey, this is an old device, it's really slow.
Yes. And if you plug a newer device into an older USB 1.1 port, you'll get a message that says, this device can perform faster. Ask how. So USB 2.0 is the newer, faster specification. That's 480 megabits per second.
Yeah.
And
super fast. Great for moving, photos from a camera, data, on USB keys, that kind of thing. Although a bit deceiving, 480 megabits is the maximum in the lab.
Yeah,
real world speeds, half that?
Yeah, so there's 2 types of transfer on that, and there's burst mode and sustain mode. So sustain mode is just keep it going, so minutes after that. That's typically why when you have something like digital video, like when we capture lab rats on our DV cams and then capture it, it's via FireWire, because USB 2.0, despite being faster, it's 480 megabits per second as opposed to FireWire's 400 for that first generation of that. FireWire can keep delivering that, whereas USB, after a while, sort of poops out and sort of backs up. It's just the nature of it being a serial technology.
Right.
So,
what to next? I suppose, so here's the thing. The kinds of devices you're going to encounter USB on, there's a gamut of them, right? And pretty much every single, so if you buy a printer today, if you buy a scanner, if you buy a USB storage device of some sort, either a flash memory or hard drive, you're going to use a USB connector.
And let's have a camera, everything.
Everything,
right.
Let's have a quick look at, I don't know if we can see, or maybe we'll insert a picture here of what a USB port looks like. So as you can see, it's sort of like a chewing gum, Wrigley's chewing gum sized connector. You can plug, a device in there. The plug can only go one way.
Unless you push really hard and break things.
Right. But easy, right? Plug in, plug out, and that sort of thing. But to make it work, you also need drivers, right?
You need drivers, and for the most part, a lot of those drivers these days are built right into the operating system. So if you have Windows XP, With Windows 98, since that was the first operating system where USB came into existence, the earlier versions of Windows 98 didn't have a lot of the drivers you needed. So something called USB mass storage class, which handles all of your flash drives, all of your hard drives, that's now built into things like Windows XP, Vista, into Mac OS X. So if you plug in one of these things, in general, you don't even need to think about it. It's just, all of a sudden, it's an external drive that's on your system. Older ones you needed drivers for, so Windows 98 and maybe Windows 98 Second Edition, depending on what type of device it was, might require a specific driver.
What about over on the Mac side of things?
Over on the Mac side of things, again, you just plug it and you go. And that's the same with external hard drives and with the flash drives, unless you had a very particular kind of enclosure for a hard drive that you're putting on there. Some of the earlier ones, they didn't conform to mass storage class, but if you get something new these days that's
from SanDisk or
from SanDisk,
any of the large Lexar, people like that,
right? And any of those, or the new hard drives from Seagate or whatnot, those should be standard mass storage class. So you just plug it in, and it should be good to go. You just install the drivers from the Windows cache on the hard drive, and you're good to go.
What about Linux? Do you know?
Linux is a little bit iffy in some, but the newer versions of Linux, and again, it'll depend on the version of Linux that you have. So there are so many different types of Linux, so many different versions of each of those operating systems. Like Ubuntu has like 6 trillion different types of Ubuntu. Most modern ones will have USB mass storage class already pre-built in, so you shouldn't have to think about it. If you're running an older version of Linux, you may have to update your core to accept those.
Right.
But I found with my work with Linux, you just plug it in, and there it is.
It works.
It works.
Fabulous. All right. Anything else to add? Because I think we should do a demo on troubleshooting your USB connector and the drivers and that sort of thing.
Oh, why don't we get right into that?
Let's do it. All right.
All right. So we're going to show you at the very least one thing that can be a problem sometimes, and the one thing that I hate more than anything with USB is when you plug something in and it goes dum 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 and just doesn't work, could not recognize it.
Right.
So sometimes it's an issue. Oh, this is one thing that we should add before we get into this. USB carries power over the pins. So you've got inside every USB device here, you've got 4 pins, and we'll take a close-up photograph of this as well. But you've got 4 pins, 2 of them are power and 2 of them are data. Okay. All right. So when you have a device that you plug in and it doesn't recognize, it could be a power issue as well. Okay. So first of all, if something's not working and it does have the option for power, it's possible that your system is not delivering enough power through the USB bus. Right. So either
especially with more high-powered devices like hard drives that are really demanding on the USB bus for power and that sort of thing.
In general, something like a flash drive shouldn't require an awful lot of power. Something like a mouse shouldn't require an awful lot of power. Although, if you're pushing your system to the edge already and you plug in one of the new optical mice that flashes a laser down at the desktop, you may run into the issue. So if you're plugging that in and it's not working,
so what's the solution?
More power. The solution is upgrade your power supply potentially if you're really running on the edge. So
on your desktop machine.
On your desktop machine, and that's one of the issues with notebooks. If you're doing this on a notebook, there may not be a lot you can do. So if you have a bus-powered hard drive that gets its power directly from the USB, and we'll show off one of those at the end of the show, then you may not be able to run one of those. If you have the possibility to plug in an adapter for that, that might be what you have to do for that.
And you can also get a powered USB hub, correct?
A powered
that's
USB
one way
hub
around it.
Will help.
Right. So that's basically a connector that allows you to connect multiple USB devices into one. It looks like sort of like a router. And you plug that cable into your USB port on the machine, and that's powered as well. So you actually have a power to the wall.
Right, and that certainly has helped me in the past as well before. So if you plug it into the power, then it takes the load off of your computer, and your computer doesn't have to deliver all the power to these devices. So there we go. Thank you very much for that catch.
You're welcome.